we had talked in the in our further thoughts about cross-discipline episode about doing like a blog type thing.
Yeah.
Do you remember this?
Vaguely, yeah.
Yeah. So we were talking about doing you said you would be more comfortable if this was in like written form, but I had suggested, why don't we kind of keep our listeners up to date with what we're working on other than the podcast?
Yeah.
And like, we're obviously going to, like, that stuff will come up from time to time on the show, but if they're interested at all in like what we're learning, what we're engaging with, and what we're challenging ourselves to do, and what we're thinking about, what we're reading, whatever.
Yeah.
Like, that might be an interesting element to add to the show.
I recall there being a debate about how much that was a social media thing too, right? Like it may have tied in with that discussion of like, should we be figures on social media? Like have individual in addition to the show being like a thing on there? Like, should we each have a voice on it?
Yeah, that's something that comes up actually a lot.
Yeah.
Like probably a third of the time that we sit down to tape something, we end up talking about, if it's just you and me, we end up talking about social media and can we actually use it, and or should we?
Well, I remember that being part of my defense for why a blog-esque thing would be cool. At least for my own way of expressing myself. Like, I would feel like I could do that. Like, I could get my head around updating a thing that's just like a blog that's not super interactive. Like, you just write something, you try to do a good job on it, you put it out.
Yeah.
It's not like updating in real time. You're not getting pinged. Maybe it is. I don't know actually how blogging works, but I could get my head around this as opposed to like just suddenly getting a Twitter.
And yeah, okay, I see what you mean now. Yeah, I would not want to do it as Twitter, and I wouldn't really want to do it as like a Facebook thing.
Yeah.
I mean, we should probably do it on TikTok.
Yeah.
But I don't think we're going to.
I still think we should try to do TikTok for like a month, dude.
It would be hilarious. Except like no one would be able to see our side of it when we're fumbling with the phones and completely failing to be the millennials that we are. We
could do a nested TikTok, like have somebody TikToking about us trying to TikTok, and then we do a TikTok. Like somebody whose entire TikTok is devoted to us trying to learn how to TikTok. Just filming the 5 seconds of like, what the fuck is this? And then we do ours.
Okay, I like that.
There's a lot of latitude for puns in the TikTok world, I feel like, too. We could have some fun with this. So I'm game is the point, though.
Okay. All right. I like the idea. Well, I kind of like the TikTok idea. I like the blog idea, but we need to agree on a platform for it.
Yeah.
Because I don't know. I had this conversation with Ryan Herrick recently. I was like, a big part of the mind fuck that is social media is that people don't blog anymore. Mm-hmm. People blog in 140 characters or as Facebook posts or like, and not that blogs aren't still a thing, but they're more of a specialized thing now where people who were just kind of like blogging as, the live journal, open diary era, like that kind of quote unquote blogging got turned into Facebook statuses basically, where blogging as self-expression is now a status update.
That makes sense, actually. It's taken on way more of like a journalistic tone than a diary.
Yeah.
So, I could definitely see that.
Yeah. So that said, I don't really know where I'm assuming WordPress is still a thing, but I haven't used it in a decade. So,
I mean, it's definitely still a thing in like a web design context.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know like a bunch of different hosts we could use for if we were to like make a blog. I don't know if like, do you just link to something? Like, does the blog host itself have any ability to like determine the traffic that you're getting? Or is it just something that like you would link to? Like you would post on your Facebook and say, hey, blog post happened today.
I would assume the latter.
Because that's been mystifying to me, like how these things get read, like how active of a role does the blog itself play? I've always, for some reason, envisioned them as passive things. Like you do something else and then you blog and people are directed to the blog because of the something else.
Yeah, that is what I would assume as well. So either way, we're stuck with more social media than we want.
Yeah.
What we need is a social media manager.
Yeah. Yeah.
And if anybody wants to volunteer for that position, we cannot pay you, but we will appreciate you. And I'll give you all my passwords to everything. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I'll do it if you make that noise once an episode. You have to somehow work that in. I'll just volunteer.
Oh, God. I'm not going to do that to you. I won't put you in that position. No, I actually think that might be a good idea, though.
Yeah, no, I agree.
Because we're both so passive when it comes to social media.
Yeah.
And like, I'm way more active than you, but that doesn't mean much.
No.
So,
Well, I've gotten to a place with, like, I never liked it, but I've really gotten to a place with it where I'm like, I'm kind of uncomfortable with it.
yeah.
Like, it brings me into a mental place that I just don't like. And
Yeah.
I don't know what it is. It's nothing in particular. It's just like, I don't know. I just can't do it. And it's feeling like less and less of a problem, even though it should, in a way, like in the postmodern world sense, it should feel like way more of an obligation, I think. Because I don't disagree with people when they say that, like, it is a facet of our lives now. I just, like, yeah, I don't know. It just doesn't feel, it feels like an allergy or something, like an intolerance, like a, you know, when you don't have celiac disease, but you've got like a little bit of a gluten thing.
Sure.
It feels like that. It's like I can go on there, but I don't feel great after.
Yeah, I understand. Well, we need to reach a conclusion about this.
Yeah. Well, personally, I would be down to do a blog like companion thing, like something where like we could post, each of us could post a thing like once a week or some whatever, and just kind of have our own little corner of this thing that we're doing that could tie in as much or as little as we want with the episode we just did. And from like a logistical standpoint, that wouldn't be too hard. We could get a custom URL and we could get a blog host and pretty much run whatever we would need because we don't have tons of multimedia or anything like that.
Yeah.
So I don't think that's impossible, and I personally would be down to do that. But I think it would just be the type of thing we have to like both want to do, and because it would be a tough thing to half-ass, basically.
Yeah.
Like, it doesn't have to be crazy in scope, but it would have to be consistent, I think, in order to work.
Yes. Okay. So the first question would be, can we be consistent with it? And I think the answer is an easy yes.
Yeah.
The second thing would be, is it worth our time?
That's
And I think that depends on how much of our time it is from week to week or month to month or whatever.
Yeah.
And I think that if I were to sit down bi-weekly and write out, basically just answer a questionnaire,
Mm-hmm.
I think like enough is different for me every 2 weeks or so
Yeah.
that I could answer that questionnaire and we can just upload it that way. And then also having a blog as a platform would allow us to elaborate on some things that like we didn't get to touch on in certain episodes, or like, further companion materials that we stumble upon later.
Yeah, definitely.
So I think having that as a platform would be valuable no matter what.
Yeah, I agree. And it seems like the type of thing where it might be a little bit of a time adjustment at first. Like, it might sort of be, I know for me, it would be something I have to like make sure I consciously build into my routine.
Yeah.
But I think that might be good. Like, I think it would be a healthy thing if we set a good precedent where we don't have to write like a 10-page document every day or something. Like, we can just say once a week, I gotta like say what I've been up to, or once every 2 weeks, I gotta like say something about a book I've been reading. Like, it'll be kind of nice to make ourselves dig into that place and reflect in those ways. It's like the benefits of keeping a diary. It's
right.
I can see it having really healthy, good benefits without the toxicity of like, let's dig into the analytics and see if people care. Like,
yeah,
it's just a very logical companion to what we're doing.
Right. So depending on how editing goes, I'll just say this for the listeners. We're about to release a companion episode to our cross-discipline episode with Brian Dickens, where it's just the two of us talking about, some other thoughts that came up. And in that episode, which may end up on the cutting room floor, is a little bit where we talk about maybe keeping an online journal of sorts, where we talk about what we're working on, what we're learning, what we're getting done, what we're curious about, blah, 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 as sort of an accountability tool. You know, as this, like, we should keep better track of what we're learning and keep better track of our progress. A, just so that we can see it and be accountable to the progress that we've documented so far.
Yeah.
B, so that there like is a document, like documentation of progress is a cool and valuable thing to do for yourself. And C, so that listeners can like play along with us, basically. You know, like if you're interested in the kind of stuff that we've been talking about, cross-discipline or otherwise, and you yourself have these kinds of curiosities and contemplate to the degree that we do the existential mysteries of the world, then you might want to play along, so to speak, whatever that looks like. So should this stay in, and should we decide to do this? That is kind of what we're trying to debate right now, is whether that's worth our time and whether that's something that we could commit to long term. So I'll say it again. I think that bi-weekly long term is totally feasible for me.
Yeah, I think that's like, if it's an idea that seems even remotely interesting, there's no reason why we shouldn't be able to do it bi-weekly.
Yeah.
Because if there is an issue with that, we can just toggle the scope of it. Like we can just say like, this maybe is too long, or this is, we're digging too deep and we should just write about something, like just keep the thing in motion. Like there's always going to be a variable we can play with to make it doable at that point. So what if we just set a time frame?
A time frame to get it launched and to be consistent with it and see what happens?
We'll just say like on Mike, we'll do it for 4 months bi-weekly and see if we like it.
Through the end of the summer.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, okay. That sounds good to me.
Then we'll have a thing and say, are we like, we'll come on this thing and say, oh, do we like this?
We'll do a debrief
we're shutting
again.
This shit down.
And But I say that we should have like 20 questions written out, and then every 2 weeks we choose however many we want to answer. Okay. So like it doesn't have to be all the questions. If there only 5 apply to us, or if only 5 are like calling out to us, then we can just do like a little post on that maybe. Or it can be a free form blog. I also don't want to like limit things in that way, but
that could be fun though. I do remember we tried to do a lightning round.
Yeah.
Did that ever make it out onto anything?
Fuck no, it didn't.
I guess we could try that.
I still have it saved.
I remember it being kind of a mess, but
it was a mess. Yeah.
I thought we had a couple of good questions though in there. We were just winging them. I think it was just like
we were making them up as we went along. Half of that was talking about the plague. Oh yeah. And then we did the book club after that. I actually thought about using that for that episode, but I didn't. But yeah, we tried to do a lightning round. It was a failure and a disaster.
That was one of our like early ideas too. I think was like, we're gonna try to work this in organically. It's going to be great.
Well, we tried for months to like record a proper intro to the show.
Yeah.
And finally we just landed on like, well, we've recorded a dozen episodes and none of the intros have sounded right or like sounded organic. So let's just tape ourselves talking about what we've been doing rather than introducing the show as in like a, scripted radio kind of way.
Yeah.
And I think that works well. But yeah, this could be like the lightning round, but not a failure.
Yeah. No, I like that idea though. I think we can do it.
All right. So this is the official announcement. We are starting a blog. Sure. And maybe we're on TikTok.
Yeah. Oh.
Look for us. I don't know.
I don't even know where you'd look.
There's probably a search tab.
Yeah. Do we have to get, I think we should just get a consultant of some kind for this. Every question I'm about to ask is just not something like, it's just probably stuff people know. So let's get Maddie Williams back on.
Yeah.
Have her teach us how to do any of this.
Yeah, let's do that. gosh, when this airs, that episode is still a month and a half out from being released. But yeah.
We'll fix it in post.
Okay, I wrote down a bunch of questions that we're going to try to answer tonight. So this is our 25th episode. It might be more appropriate to call it our 25th upload because this is including all the bonus materials and Scatterbrain sessions and book clubs and everything. So, but this is our 25th episode. So it feels appropriate to kind of ascertain where we're going with this. And sort of, we have, basically monthly debriefs privately, but I think there might be some value into having this sort of debrief session and airing it and sort of deciding on some of the changes that we might make for the future or some of the things that we definitely want to keep and like they're going well and we're not going to be like reading off, listener stats and analytics and stuff like that. But just person to person, what feels right about this and what feels different from when we started and whether that's good or bad, whether it feels more productive, whatever. So the first thing that I have written down is what feels different.
Compared to the earlier tapings or the idea itself?
Yeah, the earlier tapings.
To me, it just feels less, it feels more like the way we talk when we're just on the phone or hanging out or whatever. I remember that feeling a little bit like stiffer in the earlier ones. Like it just felt like I was honestly just scared shitless. Like it was just like something I had never done in a co-hosting capacity really. Like I'd been a guest on stuff, but it was just something that was terrifying and new. So I feel a lot better about that myself and feel more natural. I don't know that I feel good like in a skill way, but I feel like this is at least how you and I talk.
Yeah, I would definitely agree. At first I would say that I was also not scared, but intimidated enough that I think I was kind of putting it on a little bit. Like I was putting on airs kind of.
Okay.
We've talked about this before. We don't have to cover it at length, but it kind of seemed like we were mouthpieces for the facts.
Yep, definitely.
More than anything else. And like I think a big advantage has been allowing ourselves to showcase our curiosity rather than showcase what a Psychology Today article had to say about something every single episode,
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Well, I remember that being an early conversation and an early concern kind of just how and how much respect should be paid to the idea itself. Like the idea that we had, I remember us being worried about like, we didn't want to be just like, that stereotype of like two guys who are like, we have great conversations. We just start a podcast. Like that's such an easy thing to think makes sense. And for all I know, that's what everybody thinks everyone thinks they're not doing, and we might be doing that. Like, but I remember trying to be like, we should really try to care. Like we should try to really honor the facts and honor the subject and honor our own ignorance and make sure that we can actually earn our place.
Yeah.
So if somebody's listening to this, we're not wasting their time. But it ended up being a little bit counterintuitive where it's like, I think it could get so unnatural by being like that because we're not doctors and we can't really offer that to people. We have no right to it. So when there are facts that we have some command over, we can relay those or we can like show research we've been doing, but it should almost be adjacent to our own curiosity because that's the thing. That was the core of it when we first had the idea to do this was like, we've both spent our whole lives digging around in our psyches trying to make sense of stuff. Like that's what we know.
Yeah.
Is how to not know anything.
Yeah, I love it. So the next question is kind of a B-side to it. What hasn't gone as planned?
That's tough. I don't know. Because that has a negative connotation, but it also has just kind of a pretty neutral one or positive one.
Has anything gone not as planned that feels wrong?
I don't know. You go first. I want to think about it a little bit more.
Okay. For me, not really. Literally the only thing I can think about that hasn't gone as planned is I thought that I would be way more ahead of schedule in like editing and everything. Yeah. And that's another thing that we're going to talk about tonight. But yeah, I think that like production wise, what has not gone as planned is like I had 4 months before we launched to like get a bunch of legwork done.
Yeah.
And that was hugely beneficial to me. But during that time, I wasn't really working on any other projects. It was just like recording like original scoring compositions for our show and editing the conversations that we had had.
Yeah.
And then I reached a point where I started working on other projects, and I was like, I'm ahead of schedule enough that I can, you know, take a break for a week. And taking a break from this show for like a week or two means I lose a lot of headway.
Yeah.
So that's kind of the only thing. Like, what hasn't gone as planned for me is that I don't really have as much time as I'd like to work on other projects that are kind of more personal. But as far as the show goes, the things that haven't gone as planned are only good.
Yeah.
The way that I see it.
Yeah, I feel like it has only been like kind of pleasant surprises. Like I remember us talking about the idea of having guests initially as a thing that maybe we could have that at some point, but we weren't totally sure, or we weren't sure how much. A lot of it was just the audio aspect. We weren't sure how many people would be willing to like tape and stuff.
Yeah.
But that has been a very pleasant thing to realize, like, A, it's fun, and B, we can do it, and C, people can do it. It was like, that was awesome to realize that, like, oh, this is a sick thing to be able to do. So I've been psyched about that. And we had enough of a plan to have a direction and to have parameters that we needed to work within, but we didn't have such a crazy airtight plan that we could deviate and screw it all up.
Yeah.
I think that was the beauty of like how we tried to do checkpoints a lot, as opposed to like, this is how it's going to be and we're going to fight to keep it in this box. We just said, like, we're going to do it this way until this date, and then we're going to talk about it, and we're going to see if it's working, and then we're going to do it this way until this date. And I think a lot of it for me has been positive because of that. Like, we've been able to recalculate on the fly so many times without it becoming an issue, because we built that time in.
Yeah. I'll tell you something that, like, not that this hasn't gone as planned because it wasn't planned, but something I didn't anticipate was, and, you know, speaking of guests, probably about like a quarter of the time when we have a guest on, our energy isn't where it could be. You know, like either you're super tired or I'm super tired, and it's amazing having a co-host to like pick up the slack.
Yeah.
And it's not something that we ever talk about. It happens completely organically. When one of us is exhausted, the other one just like ends up asking more questions.
Yeah.
And it works out so well.
I never thought about that. Like, yeah, that is totally a thing.
And now that I've brought it up, it's going to fail every time. But but yeah, that's been really cool.
That's been something I've actually been aware of, at least within myself, of kind of like the different dynamics that can happen, not only when you're just talking to a group of people or to a pair or a single person, like when there's kind of a group that's talking about a topic and not just like, you know, like leaning against a venue wall and like talking, like,
yeah,
it really is kind of, there's a specific sort of energy that helps to be able to bring. And I'm becoming more and more aware of like the days when I have it or don't have it, and what I need to do to get it or not get it. It's something I was never aware of before. And it's tough, because there have been times where I've walked into this room, sat down at the mic and thought, all right, I'm good. Like I'm ready to go. And the instant we go live, I'm like, oh shit. Like I'll just realize like I've smacked into that wall somehow, like just from whatever's happened that day or that week. And it's strange. It's a very specific feeling. And it's never specific to anyone or anything or whatever. It's just kind of like, it's a different type of energy I find it's the way that I listen.
Yeah.
That screws with it, where I'm not necessarily listening for like the next point that I need to make, which is kind of like, it seems like part of the hosting duties is like, you want to be listening intently, but you also want to know what in the hell you're going to do because you're the host.
Right.
And
but sometimes you like listen like a wallflower.
Exactly. And then I'm like, fuck, well now I need a few minutes to formulate what I was supposed to say.
Yeah.
And when you're just hanging out talking, you can just nod and say and whatever. But when you're on this thing, it's like, oh shit, no, I have a job.
Yeah.
So I need to practice that more, I'm finding.
Yeah, no, same here. Like I will just sit down to record and feel completely ready and coffee in hand,
Yeah.
totally psyched for the interview. And then I realize, and it could have something to do with, like, if I haven't spoken to a single person all day,
Yeah.
sitting down for the first time to talk to somebody. That's the case right now. I said about 10 words to my landlord earlier, but like
Well, you wear it well, man.
yeah, well,
I wouldn't have known. I haven't known any of these times.
but anyway, if you haven't talked to anybody all day, maybe you're not warmed up, you know?
Yeah. No, I mean,
Which
that's
is why,
kind of what
like,
it is. Yeah.
a lot of the time when we have guests on, I will say, like, I'm going to hit record now, but let's take 15 minutes at least to warm up. And,
Yeah.
like, if we don't need it, then whatever we say right now can go into the episode, whatever, maybe. But I think it's always good to just, like, warm up with people, especially because we've had a pandemic going on and it can feel foreign, you know, just talking to people that you're not usually talking to.
Well, that's actually part of it. I've noticed it takes me longer when I'm meeting somebody over Zoom, especially somebody I've never spoken to before. Any of those things are compounded by the fact that what I could do in a minute of body language and eye contact in a room with that person takes me like 15 minutes on Zoom, because I spend so much time just selfishly trying to kind of read the situation and figure out, like, you know, figure out their conversational style and stuff. Like, I don't want to just be bowling over people. I don't want to be too reticent the whole time. Like, that kind of finding those middle grounds where, like, we get to know each other. It's instantaneous and it's not even like a formal thing. When I'm in a room with a person, it just kind of happens and, you know, you figure out where you fit in and then you just hang out there. But on Zoom, it's so hard. You can't even tell. It's hard even sometimes to know if you're on their screen.
Yeah.
So stuff like that, I'm like, I don't have any idea how to play this. So it's tricky. It's a different skill set, I guess.
Okay, next question. Is anything missing from the show?
Well, all right. So I guess I don't know if the listeners know that I've never listened to it. So I don't know. But
so I guess the question would be, on your end, is anything missing conversationally? And on my end, is anything missing in the production?
I don't think, I mean, honestly, just maybe being in the same room, like we've always talked about, like just you and I sitting down together in a studio or something. Like, I would like to do that at some point.
Same.
But like beyond that, I don't know. I mean, this feels pretty natural at this point. It feels comfortable. So I'm all right with it.
I mean, I don't know what your household rules are looking like right now, but like if we were, you're vaccinated now. When I get vaccinated, can we do this in the same room?
I would feel comfortable with it, I think. Yeah. I mean, I'll ask them, but like, I think we're both being pretty safe about this whole thing, that like, it would be okay.
So, I mean, we'll have that to look forward to, I think.
Yeah.
It'd be interesting to edit things that way too.
Yeah.
Because Amber and I were in the same room for that episode, and that, like, editing that where we're both in each other's microphones, like, I hadn't had to do that in so long. I was like, what the fuck is this?
Yeah.
Why isn't this track completely silent? I can't just move it wherever I want.
We'll do it in the same room, but we'll whisper.
Yeah.
That'll be fun for everyone.
I like it. No, so on my end, what's missing, and this is going to be a segue into the next question. What I feel is missing is more production. In that I've always kind of envisaged in my head, like, that there would be more scoring, a little bit more, I hesitate to say narration, but a little bit more voiceover stuff. More than just when I punch in the beginning and the end, do an intro and outro, where I think that I would like to have more scoring where the concepts can be discussed in a voiceover over the show's music. Whether that means that, like, I want to start doing an introduction to every episode that way, or whether that means, I don't know what it means. Um, I would have to experiment. I don't have kind of a hard line goal in my head
Mm-hmm.
about what that would look like. But I'd like to use more music because that seems to be something that people really appreciate
Mm.
about what our production looks like now. And yeah, I would just have to experiment with it and see what happened. And but like that kind of radio has always fascinated me,
Yeah.
you know. And I remember Owen said the other day that when he listens to podcasts, he usually listens to them sped up and he doesn't really pay much attention to the music. And I was like,
Yeah.
I mean, great for you, but the music is like what pulls me in the most. If there are music cues or if there is scoring underneath the words. So it really depends on the kind of listener whether this would be an endeavor worth my time, you know, worth putting more effort into. So I kind of have to weigh. I wish we could just take a poll,
Yeah.
because it's kind of like, what do I think would sound really cool, and what are people actually going to appreciate? Like, does it actually give it value to be more produced than it is?
Yeah.
And I'm not sure.
Yeah, it's tough because there is value in both. Like I'm definitely more of the Owen listening experience myself, but it's not necessarily because of any less value that a really produced and scored podcast has.
Yeah,
Like it's just that when I'm in podcast mode, like going around in my life, like typically I'm not in a place where I can hear very well. Like I'll be
sure.
driving and my car sounds like shit, so I'll be blasting it and I want to focus on like the content, but I'm not always paying like really minute attention the way I would be if I really liked a piece of music.
Right.
Same way, like I listen a lot when I'm like cutting the lawn, like when I'm doing stuff like that. And yeah, so like fidelity and as long as the quality is not actively working against it, I'm game.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's seems to be one camp from people that I've talked to, and then the other camp is like it's kind of a piece of art, like we're making the way like radio theater was and stuff like that. Like that was its own thing. Like that was
Yeah.
but yeah, then it's a much greater production cost at that point.
Yeah. Right. And it's like, on one hand, I guarantee you that our friends don't care.
Yeah.
Like the people we know or who are, you know, maybe one circle removed from us is probably the bulk of our listenership at this moment. But do they care whether it's more produced than it already is? No, absolutely not. On the other hand, there is market research that says the most successful podcasts are the ones that are more produced.
Yeah.
But what that looks like, I'm not really sure.
Yeah.
So, okay, I said that was a good segue into the next question. And the next question is pros and cons of possible format changes.
Mm-hmm.
The pro for me would be, it would be a better sounding, to me, it would be a better sounding end product.
Mm-hmm.
And I would get to experiment with a sonic landscape more.
Yeah.
Which is something I love doing, but something that is also time consuming, and that would be the con.
Yep.
I don't expect you to have a ton to not having listened to the show, to have a ton to weigh in on, but
well, yeah, I mean that's like I've always kind of maintained like I will support you on anything on the production end that you feel is either too taxing or might be a good direction. Like that I understand to be kind of a requisite part of my not listening to them. Like
right.
I can't possibly start throwing my weight around about like production decisions. Like that would be insane.
Well, no, that makes sense. But you know, like I look at it as like we're the co-execs, you know?
Yeah.
And I don't think that it's appropriate for me to make a decision like that. Like I can make minor changes to the format if I wanted to, so you wouldn't notice. But
you could do anything, dude. No, but that's what I was going to say is like from the outside, like just from not having heard ours, I can kind of like, I do have opinions on some of those things. Like there's certain things that I could see like just in terms of either past projects or like knowing how we work together or anything like that. Or even just looking at the concept and still seeing it for a concept that's developing rather than something that's sort of come to fruition. Because I think that's honestly a benefit of our two perspectives on this whole like process is I've seen the concept evolve exclusively. You've seen the product with the concept evolve.
Right.
So we both kind of get like a macro and a micro thing that can go together sometimes. So I could see a benefit to it being more produced in that it becomes more robust. There's more things for people to get into. If there's more angles to it, there's just more shit in there that could be cool.
Mm-hmm.
It definitely separates it from just the pack. Like, it becomes kind of unique and kind of there's more room for expression. But then the con would be that it is more time consuming per episode.
Mm-hmm.
There's just more moving parts, and that I think honestly it would necessitate a format change, both for practical reasons and for just I just feel like it would be more appropriate, if it got really, unless we had like a freaking dream team behind us, like cranking out shit at the same rate. Like if we're taping them and they're editing them and they're scoring them and, everybody clicks together, like the way SNL does stuff.
Right.
Like they can do that every week because they've got like 200 people doing it. But it seems like it would benefit from being like seasons or something if we got to a point where it was like fully produced.
Yeah.
But then the drawback is like the ideas. I feel like there is, since we're not experts on stuff, there's like an implicit kind of B plot to this for me where every topic we do, that's where we are on that topic at that time. Like we try to get from where we are at the beginning of the episode to where we end up at the end with the capacities and the tools and everything that we have in that moment. But by the time that episode comes out, we've read more books, we've talked to more people, we've grown. So I would be wary sometimes of doing these topics these ways and then waiting 6 months and then putting it out.
Mm.
Like I think the weekly thing benefits us in the sense that we're leaning into the ignorance, we're like saying like this is a constant discovery. And so the show is a constant expression of a constant discovery.
Right.
It never stops moving long enough to indicate that we might have actually learned something.
That's a good point. Okay, so regardless of whether or not we undergo a format change,
mm-hmm.
I've actually been thinking about putting out a call for scoring submissions.
Mm-hmm.
So if anybody is out there and is a DIY music producer and wants to submit some instrumental tracks in the vein of the instrumentals that I've recorded for the show, the instrumentals we used from Ryan Herrick's new album, the instrumentals we used from Ali Zagami, which was kind of like a little bit more hip-hoppy, but kind of worked very well for that sort of radio show scoring vibe. So if anybody out there is listening and wants to submit instrumentals that they're okay with us using on the air, that would be really cool. And if you want to reach out, we actually have an email now, blackmarkettherapypodcast@gmail.com. And while I'm asking for submissions and while I'm asking for volunteers, we had discussed earlier that we might want someone else to take over the book club, which I think would be a really, really beneficial direction for both of us, because as it turns out, I don't think you and I are good at just sitting down and talking about books.
Yeah, definitely not in not in this way.
Not in this way.
Because I realized that immediately when we started doing our first one. Is like, oh shit, we don't talk about this like people on a show. Like we just talk about books because that's what we're doing.
Yeah, exactly.
We don't talk about it like let's give a summary and then let's dig into plot point. We're not highlighting shit like.
Yeah, we're good readers.
Yeah,
and we're good conversationalists, but that doesn't always match up. So,
well, I think it's the same. It's a skill set. It's the same as like being a guest versus being a host, or being a good conversationalist but being crappy on mic. Like,
yeah,
there are all these different shades of these things, and I had no idea that reading books was the same thing until we rolled on The Plague.
It's so interesting. And by the way, I think The Plague was like actually the best one that we've done so far. But maybe that's because it was more produced. But yeah, no, I think like Trevor Sullivan is doing the narration voiceover for his documentary about his band going into the studio and recording an album. And he basically asked me, like, I know what I want to say in this, but I need you to be on the phone with me at the same time and like ask me questions and keep me focused. And then I'll just record my answers into a microphone and we'll do it that way. So we did that, and having nothing prepared, I just hopped on Zoom with Trevor and was an interviewer for him. And it went really well. And I just kind of like jumped back into my sort of Friday Night Folk zone, and it was very natural for me. But as I think about that, like, I'm very good at thinking on the fly when it comes to stuff like that. But when it comes to a book club, if I don't have discussion questions prepared, and if I don't have the right things underlined, and if I don't have my English major shoes on, which I don't always whenever I talk about a book. So like, I don't know, there's some prep work that should go into it that we don't put into it.
Yep.
So having said that, I really want to keep doing the book club.
Yeah.
But I think we need someone else to host it, to keep us on track and to lead the discussion and to do the production. And basically to just like take over all of the responsibilities that you and I currently have.
Yeah, we were talking about it like a guest, like a complete guest host, right? Like we give somebody, if we were a radio station, we give them that hour, like that's their slot almost.
Yeah, basically. I mean, we would join them.
Yeah, but I mean, that would be their show.
But it would be their thing. Yeah. And whether the guest changed every single time or whether it was the same person every time, like I'm envisioning the same person every time. Like I think it would be good to bring in a third person who joins us once a month for a book club. Because I really do want to keep doing it. We have a lot of books on our list that I'm excited to read and I'm excited to have read. Yeah. But it's a lot to frankly, I'm at a point right now where half the time I haven't been as happy with the recorded conversations as I would be if I had prepared material. And I don't have the focus to do that necessarily. But if somebody else did, I think it would be really valuable for you and I to have, you know, a discussion leader. Yeah. Where, you know, we have so much going on with the other topics that we tape shows about, or like whatever else is happening in our lives. So yeah, I think that's another thing where I think we should enlist a volunteer who kind of wants to jump in as part of the production team and also as a co-host. Yeah. And if that person is a DIY music producer, great. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, the books it's funny, they hit kind of that same spot that the early, more researched episodes hit. It's the same kind of set of issues, just presented in a way that I feel like for a while we kept thinking should work and we would make work. The way that the research-based ones were so abundantly clear as a different thing. Like we just could see, oh shit, like one day we print out like files and stuff coming into these things and we try to work these in, and then other episodes we just kind of go for it and think about the topic beforehand, and those are always the more natural ones. Like with the book, it's kind of the same thing, but there's all these logistical problems. Like think about it, we don't even always own these books, or we don't both own these books. Right. So, I mean, half the time, the whole premise of the Black Market Book Club thing was we just were mailing each other books. So just by virtue of that fact, if I have a copy of the book, you probably don't. And vice versa. So we can't, like, I think that was so much of it for me was like, if it was one I mailed back, I was like recalling from memory or like desperately looking through the Wikipedia or the Spark Notes of like, what the hell was that quote that I liked? Yeah. Whereas if I owned it, I would have just bookmarked and like, you know, tabbed each page or whatever. So that opened up some issues right off the bat. I was like, wow, this is hard when you don't have it in front of you.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then it was just the reading for homework versus reading just because, like, I don't know, it's night. Yeah. And that was something I realized I didn't read them in that way. I could talk about them if prompted, but I couldn't lead a conversation in that English class way. Yeah. Because I wasn't reading the book for those points. I wasn't looking for like things to grab. So yeah, I completely agree that I think it would be a real fun time if somebody else was taking the reins and we could, I don't know, just ride that horse.
Right. Now, having said that, we do have 2 coming up that like we're going to do no matter what. We're going to, like, I'm not saying that if this doesn't happen, we're going to stop doing the book club. But a version of this idea that could work out better is we're going to start having guests come on for these next few, I'm still going to be producing the episodes. But this Sunday, we have Ryan Herrick talking about Siddhartha. And then Brian Dickens is going to come back on to talk about a Ram Dass book, which I'll be giving you on Saturday. So only you'll have it and I won't. Yeah, that's a problem.
Yeah.
So it's not that we're stopping, but we had this discussion a week or two ago, and it would just be a lot more conducive to what we want the book club to be if someone else were to take over, and if we had somebody else to kind of like act as, if we don't have a social media manager for the whole brand, like it could at least be a good thing if somebody else who was more social media savvy took over the book club and kind of started more of a community, Facebook group thing, whatever, around that, so that we could announce what books we're actually going to be talking about so people can fucking follow along.
But the consequence of that would be everyone in the world would think, they would suddenly become aware that there's this book club podcast happening. And they wouldn't realize that, like, no, they do other episodes. They talk about all this other shit. They score them. They're fucking whole different things.
It's a whole different thing.
Yeah. But this is actually a reason I think, like, the blog companion could be helpful, though, too, because we could get into more of, like, the bookish kind of stuff, like the stuff that isn't always super great during an episode. That's where we could hit some of those things.
Yeah, but also to respond to what you just said, there are plenty of podcasts out there. Like a book club podcast would be completely appropriate to air once a month. You know what I mean? So like if we had somebody take over for that, it would just be a podcast within a podcast with no less value than it would have otherwise. Because if you were expecting people to read along and participate in the show, or, actively listen, having read the book and like kind of have the discussion from a distance with you, it's completely reasonable to think like, once a month is fine. And, so I don't see any problems with that. And if that community listens to the rest of our episodes, great. If they don't, also great. I want it to keep going, and I want to keep talking about books, but.
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah. No, there's nothing but good things could really come from that. Fingers crossed. I mean, it's just, it seems like it definitely isn't a bad thing, even if that's like what was promoted and stuff. It's just, it would just be funny to me if, I don't know, if it flipped around, People are like, it's this book club, and they talk about like psychological stuff and philosophy sometimes, but they exist once a month, and we're like, no, we did the other thing first.
Yeah. So all that's to say, if anybody is interested, reach out to us, and we'll have that conversation. So that's where we're at.
Yeah.
We're having a good time so far, both of us.
Yeah.
It's a little bit more work than I want to be doing, but that is getting easier as I kind of get the hang of technology a little bit more.
I'll start doing them to tape.
Yeah.
I'm the wild card guy, I'll throw you these curves every time it starts to get comfortable. Keep you sharp, keep you guessing. It's a healthy relationship.
So far it is. Like, so far, like, I think we work well together as co-execs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I'm happy with it. I think it helps that we do, like, this wasn't like a hire, like we kind of, it did come about as organically as everybody in that cliche says. Like, we just talk and we're like, we should tape this. Like, it was, we didn't have to change that much, which I don't know if that's good or bad in a public facing sense, but like, it means that it for me, there's always been trust. There's always been like a level of comfort that would have been harder if it was just like, you dropped into a studio with somebody and feeling it out. Everything else feels secondary to the fact that like, we just get to shoot the shit for 5 hours. And like, that's just fun. So it's like, everything else kind of builds off of that for me.
Yeah. And of course, going hand in hand with the we don't know anything thing. We're not done changing, even though we're talking right now about like what we might change and what we might not. And the format right now does feel comfortable, but also the show naturally evolved, from the beginning, and I think it will continue to evolve, both as we get more guests on the air with us and as we find out about new interesting topics that we think we should cover. So there are a lot of topics that we have written down that I cannot wait to have conversations about. There are a lot of guests that we haven't had on yet that we're going to soon that I can't wait to talk to. I'm excited for what we have coming up.
Yeah, me too. I hope people like it. I don't know. I think some of them do.
Over the summer, especially, I'm really eager to share some of the episodes that we've recorded with guests. And also what we haven't talked about yet is like kind of what our guest philosophy was going into this. Which, yeah, you got this glazed look in your eye. You don't know what
I'm trying to remember what it was.
Which was we would ideally have more episodes with guests than just with the two of us.
Oh yeah, okay.
Yeah. The reasoning being that sometimes you have to get people on who do know something.
Yeah.
And so we haven't taped with many experts yet. Like, it's mostly been just our artist friends and our musician friends. And I feel like that's going to be more or less like a segue into getting more guests on who are experts in a sense or have more experience in certain fields.
Yeah.
But the idea was to have the idea was to transition to every other episode we'd have a guest, and we've actually had way more guests than we planned to at first, just because of how things lined up. So I've been really, really very happy with that.
Same.
Yeah,
because I think our initial that philosophy only really extended to the expertise. If I recall, initially it was more, or for the most part at least, it was kind of like along the lines of how we wanted to try to model the right types of vulnerability and stuff. Like, it was modeling learning too, knowing that this is a huge part of how we approach everything we are talking about on this entire show. Like, this, you're supposed to just kind of go forth and try to learn and try to participate in your world, and it's fun. So trying to do episodes where we purposely aren't setting ourselves up for success or for knowledge or something, but we just have someone who does know what's up coming in and telling us about a subject that they have spent their life studying or that they've experienced or whatever. And it's totally grown. Not that we've we haven't done that a ton yet, but it has grown into just realizing that the type of discourse that can happen when there's somebody else who's maybe not as familiar with doing shows or who isn't familiar with the format or whatever, just somebody else being there to kind of stir that stuff up. We react differently. They bring their own personality, their own experiences, and it's fun. It's just cool. And it's another dimension to it that's been incredibly enjoyable.
Yeah.
I would like to do someday, man, if we ever get money and if the world ever gets its shit together, wouldn't it be cool to do a travel, not quite like a man on the street thing, but go to places where people are having very specific experiences and talk to those people about those topics in their setting.
Yeah.
If we were doing an episode on Buddhism or on Siddhartha or something like that, go to India.
Oh, wow.
And talk to somebody who's living it, and in that setting and kind of live there. Almost like a travel doc combined with, the Vice things, those little shorts, or other news agencies will do those sometimes, where they'll they'll send a foreign correspondent out for 7 minutes to talk about something.
Yeah.
If we did a podcast version of that, where we could get kind of creative with who's experiencing this type of thing and just try to go there. That'd be neat. It doesn't really get more vulnerable than that.
No, it doesn't. I think about versions of that all the time. Mostly I think about them as, you and I traveling to, where somebody that we know lives and doing a live show with them.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So to introduce complete strangers who are experiencing or have experience in a topic that we want to cover, that seems just as out there and exciting to me. I'd be totally down.
It'd be fun to tour.
Yeah.
And it'd just be cool.
I've thought if we were ever traveling, through Chicago,
Yeah.
Like, it would be dope to stop by Ryan Herrick's place and, put together some small show there or something. But
Yeah.
and like, also, I can't wait to make live music a part of this in some way. Like, I think that's going to be amazing.
Yeah.
Kind of two very different elements of vulnerability that we sort of have to prepare ourselves for. But that could be a lot of fun.
Yeah. Someday.
We started this at the wrong time.
Oh yeah.
No, actually, I actually think it was completely the right time. But when else would I have had time?
That's true. Dude, there's been so many things like that, though, that it's like that shitty paradox of there was no other situation that was going to make this happen. And I'm so glad that it happened, but also I can't do the next stuff, like the next steps with it or whatever. Like, there have been so many things like that have been incredibly frustrating.
Yeah.
And yeah, this is one of those where like you start seeing those opportunities to like try a different direction, and it's like, oh, you just keep slamming into that ceiling.
Also, and we'll close on this, I'm done airing content about the pandemic.
Yeah.
I've had enough of it. I don't want to keep listening to it while I'm editing, and I'm sure that listeners don't like the psychological impact and like the self-care elements of the pandemic were interesting a year ago. And now, like, if you haven't figured it out, listening to us isn't going to help you. So yeah, let's close on that. So this has been our public debrief, and some things are going to change and some things aren't. And if you want to volunteer as a guest host for the book club, or if you want to send us some of your instrumental tracks so that we can score these episodes better, or at least have like more diversity in the music, that would be nice. Shoot us a DM on Facebook or send us an email, blackmarkettherapypodcast@gmail.com, and we will talk.
Thank you for listening.